Cloud. Hi everyone, this is Coach Bina Kavalam, and this is the Marketing Casing Masterclass. And with me today is MBA2 from Kellogg, Connor Pera. And so Connor, I want to ask you to introduce yourself and to talk a little bit about your experience and what's led you to Kellogg and to your new role, which I'll let you go to. So take it away, Connor.
Sure. Thank you. It's great to be here, Bina. It's always good to catch up with you and good to help out the MLT family in any way I can. I grew up outside of Cleveland, Ohio, went to Penn State for undergrad, studied accounting in undergrad, and graduated and didn't really know what I wanted to do, but wanted to get just any sort of relevant professional experience under my belt. And given my accounting background, ended up working in financial services, mostly in operations roles for a company called SEI Investments in the Philadelphia area, and was able to have some success there and was managing a team for 2 years prior to leaving SEI to go to business school. Being in charge of a team was a really rewarding experience and one that I loved from a functional standpoint, really loved the work I was doing on a day-to-day basis, but didn't really see myself in financial services long-term and wasn't super passionate about the financial products and services. Not that they weren't great, but I just couldn't really get myself excited about the products and services. So when I was applying to business school, I was sort of thinking about all these things and knowing that I didn't want to do what I was doing long term. As I was applying, I was researching about different career paths for MBAs and started really getting into the idea of brand management and thought that was something that could combine sort of a lot of the functional stuff I was doing as a manager, working with and through people, but then also being able to combine that with products and services that were just really exciting and relatable to me. So that's what I did. I applied to business school and I applied to 7 schools in round 2, and it was definitely like a whirlwind ride. And then during the application process was when I actually got introduced to MLT and found out what MLT was all about. So I did the professional development program in 2018, and being pretty certain about wanting to get into brand management and going to Core Skills and CTLS gave me like a really good exposure and sort of reconfirmed a lot of my hypotheses about going to business school and that it was a good career path and fit for me. So actually that's how I ended up connecting with Mars and interviewed with a lot of the CPGs that are at CTLS. And so most of the major CPGs I think I ended up interviewing with at CTLS and then was able to get an internship offer from J&J Consumer and also Mars before heading to business school, which was a really, really great opportunity. I don't even think I realized the impact of it at the time, but it made the first year of business school that much more manageable. So went to Mars and really loved my summer, had a great experience, came back to business school in the fall and sort of explored some other potential opportunities and decided at the end of the day that I wanted to go back and had a great experience, loved the culture, loved my manager and the project that I worked on. So really excited to be headed back, moving to Nashville after I graduate in a few months. And also one of the things I do at Kellogg is I lead one of our interview prep groups for first years recruiting for marketing roles. So definitely a lot of the recruiting stuff is sort of still fresh in my mind, and hopefully I'm able to help out with marketing case stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. And I know there's some good news that I should be sharing as well. So You're engaged. If you don't
Yeah.
mind me sharing, sorry. Did I spill the beans? I'm sorry about that. I'm just
No,
so
I
happy
mean,
for
I
you.
don't know if anyone who's going to be listening to this knows my fiance or not, so I don't know if it's a big deal. But yeah, I was in a long distance relationship with my now fiance when I left for business school. She's still in Philadelphia, and so the long distance relationship in business school definitely can work, and we're really excited about the next chapter. So yeah.
Awesome. Very happy for you. So today what we're going to be moving into, and the goal for the session today is to really talk about how do you prep for marketing casing. Really, Connor, having you share your experience, and also to take us through a few example questions. We'll try to get to 3 or 4 questions. And I'll ask the question and I'll let Connor take it away and really talk through how he would respond and take us through some of those examples. Connor's been doing a great job in helping mentor some of the Kellogg MBA first years on marketing case prep because he's done so well with it. So I kind of picked his brain and said, hey, what about our MLTers? And so he offered his time. So really, really grateful for that as well. So with that, let's now start and shift to, Connor, can you tell us a little bit about how you started to prepare for marketing casing?
Yeah. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Bina had a huge impact on
Thank you.
the level of prep that I had and was sort of the amount of information at my disposal, but then also kind of instilled in me the seriousness of taking that prep really seriously and working really hard, and not just kind of thinking, oh, it'll, well, I don't have to do much and hopefully it all works out. I definitely felt like Bina lit a fire in us to make sure we were on the ball, and that ended up being great. So I one of the big things I did, obviously, looking through sort of obviously like just company industry research and overview, and after having gone through the business school application process, I felt pretty good about sort of knowing about brand management and generally what the job entailed and sort of what to expect in the role from a functional standpoint, and then just having familiarity generally with the company. So I think part of it was just a genuine interest, that I'm pretty like up to date on what's going on in the world of CPG. So I kind of just stayed up to date that way. But also once I started getting opportunities to interview with companies, I think first, obviously taking advantage of any opportunities on campus to meet with the companies, whether it's going to a company presentation or meeting one-on-one with folks that you know in your network, or people that offer their time to talk about their experience, is always great to get that firsthand account. So as much as you can of talking to people and just finding out more about what the job is like, and sort of understanding what a day in their life, so to speak. So that I think is a critical sort of component initially. And then once it got into behavioral interviewing and marketing case prep, I think just going through different experiences of mine, be they on my resume or not on my resume, but felt like they were valuable experiences, and sort of building out that story in the STAR framework of what the situation was, task, and what I did specifically and the result, and then also lesson learned if possible. So I tried to curate a set of stories that touched on a lot of different skill sets. And I think specifically for brand management, you definitely want to have a story that demonstrates your leadership skills. You definitely want to have a story that demonstrates your analytical capabilities, and then also it kind of ties in with leadership, but ability to collaborate and work well within a team. So I think that definitely hitting on those skills, but also other skills that you have through your experience. So building out those stories and making sure that they kind of check a lot of different boxes. That way you can use them to flex different types of behavioral questions you might get. And then I think that was probably, and then similarly with my pitch and sort of Bina kind of helped a lot with crafting that and also being able to practice that. But as far as practice, for me, videotaping myself is a huge tool. It is honestly, obviously a bit weird at first, but I just kind of got used to it after sucking it up, watching myself on video the first few times. And now I'm actually pretty comfortable with it and able to be objective with myself and give myself feedback on how I answered the question, knowing what I know. And then also as much as possible getting in-person practice with people, be it with Bina, with other people in our cohort and MLT, or with friends. I encourage first years at Kellogg to practice as much with me, obviously, but with one another as well. I think you just want to get as many reps in as you can, working through situations where you're simulating that interview environment.
Yeah, so. I mean, I got to agree with that, spot on. I remember when I was in business school, I had a buddy of mine, and he and I both wanted to transition into from wherever we were, from a different industry into brand. So we became study buddies, and we would, every Tuesday night, we would meet up at a local school and just practice all of our casing and all of our behavioral interview questions. And both of us were able to secure a couple of offers, by November of that year, just because we were so repetitive. We knew our stories inside and out, and we were strong. And we were pretty harsh with one another. Your friends aren't going to be always so easygoing. They'll be like, no, that doesn't work.
Ideally going to people who aren't just going to tell you how great you are all the time. Although sometimes you need that too.
You need the honest people. Those people are going to be like, no, that's not going to work.
Those people are good. And they'll tell you what you need to grow. And then for marketing case, as you bring up, and I know that kind of what we want to cover for the most part today. So obviously there's a lot of questions in the marketing case area around just sort of knowing a bit about the industry and about trends, and then also having examples of brands that you like sort of at the ready when you're interviewing. So one of the things that I did was I started listening to this podcast called Brand Builder. And I would listen to that, and I didn't really necessarily love the hosts of the show that much, but they would bring on folks that had started a CPG, generally in the food space, but it was generally like CPG direct-to-consumer sort of brands that were sort of up and coming. And they would just interview the person who, the entrepreneur behind that business. And it was a really, really good foundational set of brands and different sort of like emerging trends in the CPG space from a marketing standpoint. It was a good foundational set of information to have. And because they were typically like niche players, it allowed me to sort of be able to tell the interviewer about the brand more so than putting myself in a situation where, and we talked about this earlier, where you're saying something that's your favorite brand or a product that you think is well marketed, and it's something that person may have worked on like recently. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where the person who's interviewing you has access to knowledge that you could never have possibly known. So having smaller sort of these D2C consumer brands sort of in my arsenal was really helpful. And I was really interested. The podcast was really interesting too, just to hear these stories. So I did that a lot. I listened to a lot of those actually on my way to the MLT conferences and stuff. And then for marketing case, I think it was more about just learning the 5 C's and 4 P's, and again, practice. That was the biggest thing. As much as you can with another person giving you feedback, but also if you can't do that, then just putting yourself on video, recording yourself, and sort of grading yourself. With marketing case particularly, I think it's even better to have another person there because it is a bit more of a back and forth conversation. But video is also good, and it helps you catch stuff that you probably don't notice when you're talking, whether it's body language or filler words, all those kinds of things that you want to avoid. So yeah, marketing case, I think it's just about doing a lot of industry research. And for me, podcasts are always a big thing, big learning tool in my life. And then obviously some people have like ad age subscriptions that they like to use. Your school may have one actually that you can get through the school. And so just reading up a lot on the industry, but also practicing how to answer those marketing case questions as well.
Awesome. Well, with that, why don't we jump right into asking you some of those real marketing case questions. So we're going to start off with a very, very typical marketing case question. You are a brand manager and you're noticing that your brand's sales are declining. What do you do?
Yeah. So this is definitely, I would say if there's one question that if a company is only going to ask one question, it would probably be something like this one. And so for diagnosing the situation, my advice to first years and to all you guys would be to always start with the consumer. So my response would be, well, who's our consumer? What need are we solving for our consumer? And are we appropriately meeting that need? And if so, then we want to sort of go through the rest of the 5 C's and think about which one of those factors may be influencing a decline in sales. So competition, maybe a competitor launched a new product. Company, maybe there's something operationally that we're not doing as well that's leading to a decline in sales. Customer, maybe there was a relationship with one of our customers that caused us to lose distribution, and now sales are declining. And then what's the other the other C, the last one?
Oh, sorry, we said customer, we said consumer.
Channel. So channel. So maybe
channel.
Maybe we need to be doing more in e-commerce, for example. Maybe that's where our consumers are, and we're not in the right channels for our consumers. So those are the things that, based on the back and forth that you're having with the interviewer, they'll hopefully give you some information. Or a lot of times what happens is you'll say, what's the consumer need and are we meeting it? They'll say, okay, great. What else would you want to think about? So sometimes they'll just probe you to keep asking the questions that you would want to ask. And other times they'll have a little bit of a back and forth. But in this example, if there's, let's say, a competitor launch, you would then sort of have a little bit of your diagnosis. And then after you have a diagnosis, you're going to go into the 4 Ps, which is sort of the levers that you can pull to solve for the challenge or the problem that is being presented. So, price, maybe the competitor has introduced a product that is a lower price and our consumers are price sensitive. Product, maybe it's just a better product. It fills the consumer need better than we can, or it's a packaging sort of, maybe they have better packaging, more attractive packaging to consumers. Promotion, oftentimes with a new launch, you're going to promote that heavily. So it could be the case that there's a big promotion for whether that be advertising or like coupons. There's probably, if there's a new launch, that's going to, be a huge factor in the success. So that could definitely be at play, and maybe we can respond with our own sort of promotion. And then place, so that's really also kind of the distribution angle. Have they have they gotten more shelf space at Walmart? And I think also Walmart is always, depending on the category, but for most categories, Walmart is going to be a huge player. So I think that's helpful to know as you sort of approach some of these questions. You know, Walmart, Target, the big major retailers, brick and mortar, and then obviously Amazon with e-com. But those ones are always going to have a bit more power. So even a minor change with one of those customers, so with distribution to Walmart, is going to have probably a pretty dramatic effect on overall sales. So that's just like kind of bonus points, I guess, if you want to talk about and show off your knowledge about specific retailers and sort of the power they have in the industry. But yeah, and then you're just going to go through the 4 Ps and hopefully by the end, the interviewer's offering you the job.
So it sounds like what you're doing, and just to recap here, is you're picking a framework and then you're walking the interviewer through the framework, and you're thinking around what were some of the levers that you would play in as a brand manager. What would you look to diagnose the situation? And you're talking at a high level, but you're talking about, this is what I see in the marketplace. So you do have to have some knowledge, like you mentioned about, Walmart, Target, but you don't need to know the details. I didn't even say the name of the product here, and yet you were able to give me enough of a pathway to get to the answer. So what I want to encourage everybody to say here is, you need to understand the methodology behind it, and then you can answer any question. Right? 4 Ps, you can answer, 5 Cs. You're using these to help you answer the question. So know the basics, and then you can take it anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say if you ever get in a situation where you're kind of frozen by a question or taken aback, and we've all had those moments in interviews where we feel like we're not ready. And I've certainly had tons of those. You're starting with the consumer and going through the 5 Cs and 4 Ps is your best friend. So if you're able to sort of just always have that in the back of your mind, that's usually going to get you moving in the right direction, or certainly get you to a proficient sort of session with the interviewer.
Yeah, and your key point about starting with the consumer, that's always a great place to start, because that is the core, right? If the consumer, you are looking at the consumer, so start there, and when in doubt, start with the consumer, and then go through the other models.
Exactly.
Awesome. Let's now shift gears a little bit to another oldie but goodie. Giving us an example of a well-marketed product.
Yeah, so when I was doing this, as I mentioned, that Brand Builder podcast that I listened to, they had the founder of RX Bar on, and I used to use RX Bar in my interviews. It may actually be a little outdated at this point, but this was 2 years ago. So I think that one was the way that I would always think about that, and with a well-marketed product question, definitely want to talk about consumer and who the consumer is and how this product solves that problem for them. But I think maybe a little bit of a shortcut to these ones is just going right to a segmentation, targeting, positioning sort of framework or frame of mind. But that's sort of what they're looking for when they're asking you, tell me about a well-marketed product. They want to know, do you understand basically what marketing is all about, and like what it takes to, like, what sorts of things influence whether something is successful in the marketplace. So for me, when I would talk about RX Bar, I would say, it's a protein bar that solves problem for the younger consumers who are sort of kind of has a millennial target, people who tend to live active lifestyle, but obviously healthy, simple, clean eating is a huge trend in the CPG food snack space. So RX Bar does a really good job of capitalizing on solving that consumer need for the active, fit millennial with a product that is something that's suited to some of their some of their concerns about, ingredient transparency and the importance of eating healthy and clean and not just loading up a protein bar with tons of sugar. And so the packaging of our X bar, I'm sure you guys have all seen it. It just says simply what's in the bar on the front of the bar. So it's like 4 cashews, 2 walnuts, 3 egg whites, whatever, and that's the ingredient list. So I think that, and like I said, a little bit of an outdated example already, but it was a clever way of, putting the ingredients on the packaging of just, it's literally right in front of the bar.
It flips the.
Then
It
I
also
also
flips the.
sorry.
Sorry, it also flips the traditional notion of like a lot of protein bars. You don't know what's in it, right?
Right.
And it's kind of going against the grain and flipping the idea. You know exactly what's in it, and they're leading with it. And so it kind of helps from a positioning perspective of exactly who are they going after, and just supports their overall. Going back to STP, exactly who they're going after, their target, right? So, talking about how you can, the interviewer may not know the product, especially if you pick these like little niche ones. Your example, RX bar, I knew what it was, right? So, and it's a pretty norm product. But if, I think the recommendation you made earlier about picking some of these niche products, because it gives you the advantage of not, that they don't have the knowledge that you do, and you have to explain it a little bit. So make sure you're explaining give a little synopsis of what this product is in the beginning, and then go into some of the frameworks, because the interviewer may not have your background, may not know the product. And so that would be the only add I would add to that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And then the only other thing I was going to also add specific to RX Bar is related to advertising. I think they've had a few TV commercials, but they're generally pretty fun, light, sort of in-your-face kind of ads that, sort of appeal to a younger demographic. And then really where they advertise a lot is on social media, which makes sense given the target. So those are all kinds of things, obviously, that sort of fit into that segmentation, targeting, positioning framework that you want to touch on when you're saying why something's well marketed, not just it's well marketed because I like it. That can be great too. And I actually think personal stories are always powerful, but definitely get into demonstrating that something is well marketed for these reasons.
Exactly. Excellent. I think the other best thing is you come up with a list for yourself of great products that you like, especially when you go, just the products that you use generally that may not be the norm, may not be so mainstream. Like I don't like it when somebody uses the iPhone. I like to talk about, for this example, it's because everybody does that, or Nike, Gatorade. These are all big, big brands, and they put you at such a disadvantage when you're interviewing 10 people and 3 of the people say the same product. Now they're comparing you to the other person who did this. It makes you blend into the masses in such a bad way. So the idea about coming and picking something very unique and distinctive, the interviewer will learn a little bit about a product, and they'll think more positively about you. So great points on that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I'm sure they hear Nike a lot, and Apple, and yeah.
I did it when I did it. I remember, if somebody tells me Nike one more time, I'm not even going to listen anymore. I'm just going to ignore it because I'm so angry. It was getting me so. I'm like, what? Why? I love Colin Kaepernick and all this, but I mean, seriously, no. Okay, no more. Come up with another example. So anyway. Okay, so let's now move to our final example here, where you are a brand manager, and this is a slightly different example where you're a brand manager and a key ingredient for your product is no longer available. Tell me, what would you do and how would you handle it?
Yeah, so this one is, I think, one of those ones that, for me, if you're somebody like me who has a tendency to get really nervous and want to jump in right away when you don't know the answer in an interview, and then it just spirals and gets worse. this is one of those questions that can trip someone like me up, because it kind of triggers those potential panic sensations in your brain, because it's like, well, I don't know, what am I going to do? Like, it's kind of a tough spot. But I think a good frame of reference, first of all, you're going to want to use the same sort of framework in terms of the consumer, starting with the consumer, and the problem that the product is solving, and sort of backing into what role this ingredient plays in that, but also understanding that if you get a question like this, understanding that there isn't a finite number of or amount of whatever ingredient it is that is missing. I was telling Bina, one of the examples that my interview prep group was using was for Tyson Foods, and it was for chickens. If there was like some sort of
Bird flu
disease, yeah, and you couldn't get chickens from a particular region, well, obviously that's challenging, but it's not as if there's a finite number of chickens. So especially for big CPGs, you know, it's going to obviously, like I said, you're going to want to start with what's the consumer need, and sort of back into the role that this ingredient plays in the supply chain. Is there another way to get the ingredient? Understanding that that's probably going to be a bit more costly. What substitutes are available? Given that the consumer need is X, are there adequate substitutes for now that would also solve for X? And then, like I said, also thinking about from the 5Cs standpoint, leveraging your company. A lot of big CPGs have tons of scale and supplier relationships around the world. So thinking about how you can leverage that to make sure that you are still delivering the consumer need is going to be critical when you're thinking about a situation like this. Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, just kind of trying to find creative solutions that are potential substitutes. Potentially, maybe we don't need the ingredient. Maybe we can go get it somewhere else, but it's going to cost us more. And then still thinking about, again, starting with the consumer, and then just thinking through what advantages do we have, and what can we use at our disposal to make sure that we're still able to deliver whatever the sales target is, or come up short, but be able to explain and project out how short we're going to be, and sort of thinking about those sorts of implications. But again, 5Cs, 4Ps, definitely going to be a helpful framework there.
And I want to spotlight one thing you mentioned there is, what are the advantages that we have as a company? That is very, very important, because you want to be able to say, what are some of the what's our competitive advantage versus somebody else that we can leverage that maybe somebody else may not be able to do. And when you can spotlight that, it means you're thinking a bit forward ahead, and you also know a little bit more about their company. So for example, you could talk about, if there's a recall for a competitor, like what would you do? I'm trying to think of other examples, not in this example specifically, but you're trying to think bigger about their work, because as a brand manager, you're always thinking about lots of different, it's like you're juggling all these different bowls, right? And you've got to be thinking, 2 steps ahead, and they want to see elements of that in the interview. Right? You're thinking forward about the bigger, what are the risks? What are some assumptions that we should be making? How should I be thinking about this in a different light? You don't want to just say the same repetitive things over and over. And they just want to see sparks of it, that you're just touch on it. You don't have to know all the details about everything, but that you're considering it is the important thing. So I like that call out there. Anything else that you want to add to, how you would prep for marketing casing, or anything else? Any other zinger questions that you've had in your past?
I remember getting a question, and there's variations on this sort of similar scenario, but again, triggers that panic response. And I ended up not handling it great, but I kind of rescued myself toward the end. But about if I owned a Christmas tree farm in November and all the trees burned down. I owned a Christmas tree farm, and it was late November and all the trees burned down. What would you do? Yeah, so
How'd
that
you
one
answer
was
that? That's a good one. How'd you answer
that that one was scary. So at first I panicked.
that?
Like I said, I don't think I handled it great, but I ultimately got to thinking about other creative ways to use the space with a Christmas theme. I think I mentioned something about some kind of Christmas village or whatever the case may be. Like I said, I ended up not. They definitely zinged me on that one. But but yeah, those kinds of questions. But I've heard it framed in a different way about like an ice cream truck and all
Yeah.
the ice cream melts.
I
So
pineapple example. I told you about this earlier where I
yeah,
had you own an orchard of pineapples or whatever it's called, and now you can no longer pineapples are no longer edible, right? So like what do, right? How do you can no longer sell pineapples by themselves or something like that. So you've got to think creatively. And so I was trying to I was like, what? Are you asking me that? This is a pharma company asking me this question. Why?
yeah,
And you've got to come up with so I just had to riff and come up with examples for how he wanted me to come up with like 20 to 30 examples. And he actually ultimately said, come up with 100 examples of what you would use it, alternatively to ingesting a pineapple. So, you came up with like doorstop and like, I don't know. I came up with weird things of like how to use this. Like it's been a long time, but I
yeah.
remember being shocked by the question. What they're doing with this question is to see your creativity. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other piece is to see how do you react under pressure, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think on your feet?
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of it. Even if some of the ideas are weird, like I think I said I would set up, because I would be in Hawaii, right, where they would have this. I said I'd set up like a Hawaiian ice factory and just use the shell of the pineapple to serve the Hawaiian ice in. So even though they couldn't eat the pineapple, you could use it as a bowl. So I mean, I said something like stupid like that, but hey, it worked, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately got the offer. But the idea was that you're thinking outside of the box, and that's the core of this. They want people who can think on their feet, and that's what you want to demonstrate in these with the executives that are going to be in the meeting, in the interview.
Yeah, and I would actually add to that, although there's no way you can really prepare for sort of those one-off get you like to think on your feet questions, I would argue that almost the best way to be prepared for that is to just be relaxed, confident in yourself. As challenging as much as that is easier said than done, getting into that interview mode and the way for me that I feel more confident, relaxed in myself is if I'm prepared for the stuff that I know is going to come up.
Yeah.
So I know I'm gonna have to give my pitch. So and 99% of the time you're gonna be giving your pitch, and that'll be the first question. So if I can nail that cold, start off with a confident, great question that I can knock out of the park, and then a few behaviorals, I'm kind of already feeling pretty confident, and then the nerves start to fade away, and then if they ask me one of those tough ones at the end of the interview, because I'm less nervous, because I was so prepared for everything else, I'm better able to handle it. So
Momentum. You get this positive momentum
yep.
going, and you just keep going with it. So I completely understand, and that's what you want to do. You want to build your confidence up. So to Connor's point, it's all about preparation. You have the tools that you need to be prepared. Okay, it's all at your feet. It's going to be from MLT, from your school. Just use those resources. Connor, are there any other resources that you would recommend? I know we're kind of downing time here, but
Yeah, I don't, not off the top of my head, other than, obviously the MLT curriculum, anything that you have through your school that touches on marketing. I like to or marketing case or anything related to the marketing interview. I like to also keep, and mine's very, very sloppy and disorganized. And some people are much better about this than I am, but I like to keep just like a living document. It's like a Word document that I have that sort of has a bunch of little notes. It kind of has the big stories that I like to use, a bunch of little notes, tweaks here and there that I've made. I have a friend who does this really in an organized way in an Excel document, talks about what skill sets this story checks, for a particular marketing case question, what framework to be thinking about. So just sort of like a snapshot or dashboard, if that's something that you've been working on throughout interview prep season. I recruited some in the fall, and after going through first year recruiting, it was still all very relevant information to look back at in the fall, to be like, look back at all my MLT notes and stuff and sort of get myself back into the interview mode. So I think something like that is not just useful for your internship interview this summer, but will become useful to you for hopefully the rest of your career. So yeah, that's definitely something that that I wish I had a more organized version, but at least I have something that I can reference. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. I don't really know. Feel free to, I know Bina said that she would send out my contact info, but feel free to reach out to me directly if you wanted to practice marketing case. I know it's kind of crunch time at this point, but hopefully we can make a time that works for both of us if that's something you're interested in, and just connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email. But happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Connor, for your time and for all of your great advice today. We so appreciate it. And again, I will be sending out, I'll be posting this recap to the Canvas, as well as send out the information that Connor mentioned about how to connect with him. And thank you for that, Connor. All right, everybody. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
All right. Take care.
Bye.